How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the House of Horror podcast. I'm not going to do a pre-recorded intro this time because our guest today needs absolutely no introduction, because obviously my guest today is me. Today we're going to be talking about my personal horror story, and what that is basically I just want to get into, kind of all the things that got me into horror films, why I wanted to start the House of Horror, and just things of that nature. I'm going to go unscripted here. I don't really have any notes jotted down or anything. I just kind of wanted to tell my story, because I've never really talked about how I got into horror films before, and I host a horror show, so I figured I may as well talk about it a little bit. The main reason I decided to do this is mainly because I couldn't get another guest for the last episode of the show this week, and there's a multitude of factors for that. People scheduling just didn't work out, and I think I aimed a little bit too high this season because I was asking a few people that were a little out of my league. I did actually get one person who was going to come onto the show, but the schedules just didn't work out, so we're gonna have to try and do that again next year. So yeah, I'm kind of left alone today in the House of Horror. It's a crisp autumn day at 316 Dead End Drive. And yeah, so I just wanted to try this out. We're gonna see how it goes. I've obviously never done a podcast by myself before, so this is gonna be quite an experience. But I'm gonna try it out. We're gonna see how it goes. Maybe if it goes well, I'll do some more solo shows in the future. But yeah, this is just something that I needed to do today. This episode is actually supposed to drop today, so I'm really coming down to the wire on this one. And originally Emily was going to be on the show and interview me, but again, she's very, very busy with school, so it just didn't work out. So here I am alone in the House of Horror giving you guys my personal horror story, and I guess we should just go ahead and get started from the very beginning. Ever since I was a little kid, I was sort of always fascinated with horror, and even before I was really into it, I was still, very scared of horror, and even before I was into it, I was still kind of, drawn to sort of the scary aspects of things. Even in, Disney films and stuff, like Snow White, there's the creepy forest stuff, and things of that nature. I wasn't really watching horror films at the time, but I always kind of liked the things that had, a little bit of a spooky atmosphere to them, and I think I can recall the first time that I saw an actual horror film in my entire life. And I guess I'll paint the picture for you guys. I think this was around, it had to be in the mid-90s, but I want to say maybe in between 97 and 99. So I was probably in between the ages of 5, 7, maybe 8 years old. I'm not really sure the exact time frame. It might have been the year 2000. But I was certainly very young. And basically what happened was, as would happen fairly often, my father would fall asleep in the chair downstairs in our living room at the time, with the television on. And when I couldn't sleep, sometimes I would just wander downstairs and, lay on the couch when he was in the room and he was asleep and the TV was just on. So I would just end up watching all these things that happened to be on the TV at the obscene hours of the night. Normally he'd have on stations like TV Land or maybe Nick at Night, things of that nature, where maybe I'd get, some Andy Griffith, some Leave It to Beaver. I remember watching episodes of My Favorite Martian, which was a comedy sitcom back then. I don't really remember too much about it, except it was like a Martian trying to blend in with society. I think actually they remade it with Christopher Lloyd, but that's a whole other story. But yeah, so we would watch shows like that, mostly black and white shows. Sometimes Seinfeld would be on, just various things that would be on 2, 3 in the morning. I used to do this all the time because I had trouble sleeping as a kid. I still have trouble sleeping now. So I would just kind of wander down the house, lay on the couch and watch whatever was on TV. He usually had the remote right near him, so I didn't want to wake him up and try to grab the remote or anything, so I just kind of had to watch what was on TV. I guess I could have went up and changed the channels manually and stuff like that, but that would have been quite the hassle. So it was easier to just kind of lay down and watch whatever was on. I really was just trying to sleep, so if I wasn't super interested on what was on the TV, that would probably be for the best. But I remember one night in particular, I don't remember the exact year, I don't remember the exact night or anything, but I do remember the film. The film was The Mummy's Ghost. This was a Universal horror film. It stars Lon Chaney Jr. as the Mummy. Of course, I didn't know any of that at the time. I was just watching this movie. It must have been on TNT. It might have been on Monster Vision, actually. I'm not really sure, but either way, that's what was on the television. I don't really remember when, at what part of the movie it was on. I could have watched the entire thing. I'm not exactly sure, but the thing that's so like ingrained in my memory is like the last portions of the film, mainly because it traumatized me for many, many years. I was actually terrified of mummies for a very, very long time. I guess I am still a little scared of mummies. That's like kind of the one that really gets me. Like I was never really scared of vampires. I was never scared of like the Frankenstein monster or ghosts or anything like that. I was scared of mummies, like really, really bad when I was a kid. I mean, of course I was scared of like actual ghosts, but like as far as like movies go, mummies is what really got me. And yeah, like the ending portion of this film, I don't know, like I haven't really watched the film. I watched the film once since then, and that was in college, just because I rediscovered what the movie was that I remembered the imagery so vividly from. Like I remember the mummy is like in the museum and he's just kind of going crazy. He's like punching stuff out, because I learned this later on when I learned what the plot of the movie was, and I wasn't just a little kid terrified of what I was seeing. But I guess he's trying to find his mummy princess, and she like disappears. She like turns to dust like right in front of him, which we don't actually see in the film. But he starts going nuts and he starts beating up the priest that he's with. All of this I remember from when I was a kid. So he's like beating up the priest, and then he goes and finds the mummy princess, like her reincarnation basically. So what he does is, and this is the part that terrified me the absolute most, and I still had these images like burned into my retinas for many, many years after the fact. He finds the reincarnation of the mummy princess, and spoiler alert for like almost 100-year-old movie, I guess, but he finds her and he's sort of like carrying her through the forest, sort of like, it's not a fireman's carry. Basically, he's carrying her like you bring your bride in through the house, like on the first day, you're kind of like carrying her like that. And he's carrying her through the forest, and she is rapidly aging. She was like in her 20s, and she's rapidly aging. She's turning into an old woman, and she eventually turns into like this hideous, grotesque corpse. I mean, grotesque for the time, and I mean, I was a little kid. So the mummy's carrying around this corpse, basically, and he goes into the water, and the mummy and this dead corpse just go under the water, and it's so burned into my brain. You can just see her face slowly getting submerged in the water. I even remember the music that was going on at the time, and this did not help me sleep at all. This actually kept me up the entire night. I don't think I slept all that night long. I never really told anyone this story or that happened. I don't even think my parents really know about this. So yeah, I watched that. I do not remember what was on TV after that. I might have even turned the TV off or went back upstairs at that point, because I don't remember anything else other than just being terrified for the rest of the night. So that was kind of my first taste of an actual horror film, and my first taste of the Universal monsters, which obviously now I'm really into. And that movie, it isn't the best, The Mummy's Ghost. It's one of the best out of the Mummy sequels, but it's not one of the like upper echelon of the Universal horror films. You know, it's no Dracula, it's no Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon, anything of that nature. But that was my first experience watching a horror film, and it was quite life-changing. I was terrified of mummies for the longest time after that. I even remember back in elementary school, we had a singer-songwriter come to the school, and he like wrote a song with every grade, and every song for every grade had like a different theme to it. And I remember the sixth grader's song was about like going into this mummy tomb and like stealing jewels and stuff. And I remember I was terrified of their song, actually. It was just a song. I don't know why I was scared of it, but they kind of had like creepy laughter going on in the background, so it was kind of a creepy song. But yeah, so I was scared of mummies. Of course, it didn't help when the episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog came out with King Ramsay. And he's... just the animation style on him is really creepy. He's like a CG animated flat figure with normal background. And that episode, I think everyone pretty much agrees that that episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog is one of, if not the greatest and scariest episodes of the entire series. So yeah, that was just very terrifying. Another memory I have of a kid, I was probably a little bit older at this point. It had to be after 1999 because that's when this movie came out. But I remember my mom was actually watching The Sixth Sense, and I don't know if it was on TV or I don't know if she like rented it and didn't really know it was a horror film or what. But either way, she was like watching it in the house with us. And another thing that was like burned into my brain for many, many years is like the shot of the lady with like the bloody veins on her arms and stuff. She like turns around, and the shot of like someone like throwing up. I remember just like you're in like this dark like little tent or something, and like the camera like pans over, and you just see someone like vomiting on camera, and it was just like, I don't know, that was something else that was like really scary to me. I didn't rewatch that one again until college either. So yeah, like both of these movies really left a big impact on me when I was at a very, very young age. As you guys saw in my horror react video, I was scared of a lot of things that were like really irrational at the time. Like I was scared of like little short films they'd show on Nickelodeon. One thing that was not in the video that I was absolutely terrified was Zorro. I was really scared of Zorro when I was a kid, even though it's not a horror film at all. I mean, it's just Zorro. I mean, he's wearing a mask, but I guess I was like really, really scared of it. And I remember that I would be at my grandmother's house because she used to have like a Zorro trailer on an old VHS tape that I used to watch all the time. And whenever that Zorro part would come on, I would go and like hide behind the couch. And I think we had another tape actually where it was like a sing-along tape and it had a song from Zorro in it. We used to watch like all kinds of like sing-along tapes with like the Muppets and Disney and stuff. But there was one that had like a Zorro song, and again, I would go and like hide behind the couch until all the Zorro stuff was over. Just for some reason, I was really, really scared of Zorro. I can't explain it. Again, he's not a horror villain or anything. I think it was just like the black mask and he's riding around on this horse. I don't know. I just thought it was like really creepy. Maybe I thought it was like the Headless Horseman or something. I'm not really too sure about that. But yeah, that was another thing that was really, really terrifying to me. It sort of shaped my childhood. I was scared of Zorro. Besides that, I wasn't really pursuing horror films at the time to watch. Again, I was a little kid. But I was sort of drawn to it, as I mentioned, like with Disney movies, whenever it had a scary moment of a movie or something, that's really what I was always drawn to. And I would always make, little horror films at the time as well. But before we get to that, I was just reminded that I did have like a Halloween party in second grade. So I was sort of into like the spooky stuff, but I was always too scared to dress as something spooky. I would always dress up like as a video game character like Mario or something. A couple years I went as like a painter and like a bodybuilder, just like stuff like that. I would never go as like a monster because I didn't want to be scared of myself. I don't really know what my reasoning was behind it, but I remember my mom would come up to me and be like, "Oh, what do you want to be for Halloween this year?" And I would always say, "I don't know, just nothing scary." Like I used to always say that. So I know I went as like a clown one year, just like various different things, even though I guess clowns can be perceived as scary. But I would just always go as things that the other kids weren't. Like we'd have people in Scream masks and stuff. Yeah, I mean, for Halloween growing up, maybe like a good video for me to do at some point, maybe if I bring the House of Horror back next year, would do a reaction to all of my old Halloween costumes, because I kind of don't really remember everything that I was, but I remember I was never anything. I remember one year I was an M&M. That was an interesting costume, and my brother was another M&M too. So me and my brother used to do matching costumes pretty frequently. Like when I was Mario, he was Luigi, and I think I was Mario twice, but that year he was Link. So it was still like matching and stuff like that. And my brother actually was a big part of me getting into horror films, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, as I was saying, I always used to make horror-themed videos. As you guys have seen, I did Monster Troopers 2, which was a horror film. I mean, it was basically a giant monster movie. I was inspired by stuff like Ultraman and like Power Rangers and stuff at the time when there was like giant monsters walking around. I wasn't really into Godzilla at the time. I wasn't really aware of what Godzilla was. Maybe I saw trailers for Godzilla or something, and that was like a subtle influence on it. Shrek was also an influence on Monster Troopers 2, like with the brontosaurus or whatever, when he kind of like turns his head backwards. That's a shot straight out of Shrek that we did. And obviously in the outtakes, we're doing the outtakes from the Shrek DVD. But that's a whole different story. But yeah, we would make horror films all the time. Probably my favorite one that we ever made, and I'm super mad at myself and my parents and everyone, because I guess we didn't think about it at the time. But at this point that I made this film, I had switched to a digital camera. I wasn't shooting on VHS at the time. It was just like a little picture camera that you would hook up to the computer and edit on the computer. So it really was my first experience like editing and stuff. But the problem is that computer completely crashed at some point. I think when I was in high school or maybe early college. And I lost so many movies that I worked on when I was a kid. And the one that was my favorite one that I still beat myself up over that I don't have a copy of it somewhere is this movie about a troll that we made. And the way I made these movies is like you kind of rounded up everyone that you had access to at the time. Like I would have my neighbor kids that grew up in the neighborhood with me act in the videos. I'd have my cousins. Occasionally I think my mom may have acted in a few things here and there. I'm not really exactly too sure about it. But this troll movie was the first one where I really knew what I was doing from like a directing standpoint. Like the shots in it, like I had like different good shots in it that had a reason and a purpose. And we didn't have a script or anything, but this is like the most coherent story out of all the ones that we made. It was basically, it was like a cliched story. It was just like a town and someone gets attacked by the troll. And so they have a town meeting, and I played the mayor of the town, and I also played the troll in some of the scenes that I wasn't in. Everyone, well, like 2 or 3 of us played the troll for like different shots and stuff. But everyone else was also a townsperson. And basically the entire movie, people don't believe that there's a troll in the town. People want to fight the troll. You know, it's like typical like back and forth, like people aren't believing each other, and then you have the people that swear that it's real. And just one by one, the people in the town are getting kind of picked off. I think I was the second one to die, mainly because I had to play the troll for the majority of the rest of it. But the first casualty was actually Ryan Cook, who I was in the band The Heel with, and he was one of my very, very good friends growing up. And we had to kill him off first because he was actually my cameraman for the majority of this. So we got his scene out of the way so he could do camera for the rest of it. And he kind of wanted to be like taken under my wing a little bit because like I said, like I was a few years older than him and we were always very close. So like I was kind of like teaching him how to do camera stuff at the time. I didn't really know anything either, but I was just kind of telling him what I wanted. It was like a director cinematographer sort of relationship we had for this one film that we did. I don't know. He was just really interested in the camera stuff. So that's why he did that. But this film was like really fun. I remember my brother played a woman, which he usually did in a lot of the shorts that we did. And he gets killed by it. Basically everyone in the town gets killed by this troll. My sister's scene is one of my favorites. And again, I wish I still had it so I could watch it back. But it was kind of like a jump scare moment where she's in the barn, like doing work and stuff. She was like a farmer. And the troll like pops up in the window and she like screams. So it was one of like the first jump scares that I ever did. So yeah, my sister ends up getting killed by the troll. 2 of my cousins were in it as well. They both get killed off. Everyone gets killed off, basically. And then the last survivor is Ezra Cook, the youngest of the Cook children. Remember, he's just doing, like, garden work in the pitch black, because we were shooting this all day. So by the time we got to his scene, it was, like, very dark outside, and I remember he just has like a scythe or a sickle, whatever you call it, and he's just like hitting a tree with it, and the troll just kind of like hops in and he's like, I killed your friends, now I'm gonna kill you. And then they have sort of, I don't want to say like a scuffle. I think the troll like charges at him a little bit, and then just with like one swipe of the sickle, the head comes off, and then just like the final shot of the movie is Ezra Cook, or Miles as we called him back then, Fester. We called him Fester too, after Uncle Fester. And he's just like holding this mask, and he's like, it's over. It's finally over. So yeah, that was like a really fun film to do. I so wish that I had a copy of it somewhere. Maybe one day it'll turn up on like a flash drive or something that I have. I think I put it on a flash drive, like, I want to say maybe like senior year of high school, maybe. So I might have a copy of it somewhere. If I ever find it, that is 100% going on YouTube. No announcement, no nothing. I'm just uploading it. So I really hope that I do come across it again someday somehow. But more or less, I think it's lost forever, which is really a shame. That and a few other films that I made on the computer. Again, it was just like a point and shoot, like digital camera that you would normally use to take pictures, but I took videos on it. I also had like a digital blue camera before that. I don't know if anyone remembers Digital Blue, but it was like a little camera and it came with like an editing software and stuff. And I just used to make videos of my cats with it at the time. Rest in peace to the two legends, Magic and Sunshine. They were very good actors, I must say. Very, very good actors. But yeah, in school and stuff, again, I mentioned the Halloween party that I had in second grade at my house, which my parents really went above and beyond for that party. My dad was the principal at the school at the time, so he actually brought home one of those big parachutes that you'd play in gym class, so all the kids could play with that at the Halloween party. Of course, we had like bobbing for apples. We had like a game with like a donut where you hang it from a string and you can't use your hands. We did another one where like you kind of all get in a line and you're passing an apple. Like you have an apple stuck in between your head and your shoulder, so it's like kind of like balanced on your neck, and you have to pass it to the person next to you doing the same thing, so it basically like looks like you're making out with the person next to you. So that Halloween party was really fun. I went to a few other Halloween parties in elementary school. My friend Julius always had Halloween parties at his house, kind of more like on the spooky vibe. Like the one Halloween party I had was very family friendly, but his were like scary. Like we'd go outside in the middle of the night and we'd play like tag and like Ghost in the Graveyard and stuff. So his had much more like a spooky vibe. I even think I remember we would wander around to like other houses in the neighborhood and like try to scare his neighbors and stuff. I mean, this is like in the 90s. I mean, we just kind of did whatever. We were little kids. But I went to a Halloween party. I think it was like fourth or fifth grade maybe. I went with my friend Zach, who I also did a lot of the films with, and he's actually a filmmaker now as well. I haven't really been in touch with him in a few years, but he'd be a good guy to get in touch to. Maybe I'm going to have to find a way to reach out to him somehow so we can collaborate on something, because he was sort of like my partner in crime in elementary school. We used to always make our films together and stuff. But nevertheless, the two of us went to a Halloween party. I want to say this was like fourth or fifth grade. And I remember driving, because this night's very like vivid to me. I even remember driving there, and his mom and his stepdad in the car had like Thriller on the radio and stuff. Like they had like a Halloween mix, and they were at the Halloween party as well. It was like a family kind of thing. Like parents were there. It was like a I don't want to say a family party. I want to say like a multi-generational party where there were a bunch of people there of different ages, like people's parents, grandparents were there. And it was basically like in the middle of the woods at like this big barn. And there was a haunted house in there, which I was too scared to go in, so I really don't know what was in the haunted house. Brandon Cato was the one that had this party. I haven't really talked to him in a few years. Emily is friends with his little sister, Alexis. I don't want to, that came off bad that I was saying that she's not my friend. She is, but she's like more friends with Emily, which is sort of how I know her. But yeah, her older brother was in my grade, so I used to go to all of his parties and stuff, and he had a Halloween party one year, and that's the party that I'm speaking about. So the only thing that really stands out about this party, there were a lot of people there from various different walks of life. There was a lot of food there, but the part that terrified me and I was not expecting, they kind of got everyone good, where it was like towards the end of the night, like people were about to start to leave and things like that, and they had someone come in with a chainsaw and like start running around like Leatherface and starts like going up to people and like cutting them with this chainsaw. I mean, there was no blade on it, like it was all staged and like fake and everything, but it was very, very scary at the time. And of course, like he takes the mask off and it's like someone's dad or uncle or something, and it was just like all like a huge laugh. But it was so scary at the time. And like even after he took the mask off and we realized that no one was obviously in any danger, there was obviously no danger involved at all. It was just kind of like one of those moments where it kind of like makes your heart stop. And for me, it was very, very vivid in my memory. And I remember driving home from that party, we had to drop Zach off at his dad's house. So it was just me his stepmom, and his stepdad, and they were like driving me home. So I was like in the back seat by myself. And I mean, they were having like conversations like amongst themselves, and I was just back there alone. And I just remember just sort of recollecting on that moment, and it was just kind of like a scary thing for me at the time. So yeah, it was just another moment that sort of defined the horror aspects of my life. Yeah, so I started making movies from there, and I kind of got out of the horror movie thing. My parents kind of made me because I was kind of a dick to all the kids on my block and my brother and sister and stuff. So they kind of told me I wasn't allowed to make movies anymore, but we all know how that worked out eventually. But yeah, so I stopped making films at the time, started doing other things in my life. At this point, I was getting into junior high. And I remember like going to the junior high dances and stuff. And after the dances all the time, there'd always be a couple kids, mainly Alex Del Pryor, actually, who was on a few of these shows with me. I remember he would always go see like the Saw movie that would come out that year after the dance. And I don't know, like I was never really allowed to go because all these were like rated R movies and stuff. But I remember people would make plans to see these movies, and I was probably too scared to go see them anyway. But I remember that was kind of going on at the time. And then in high school, I really wasn't that much into horror. I mean, I was, like, I'd see horror movies every now and then. But junior high, basically, like, what I'm trying to say is I wasn't into the horror movies that everyone was watching on TV. But during junior high, not TV, in the movie theater, I'm completely insane and losing my mind. As you can tell, I'm not very good at doing a podcast by myself, but we're going to power through. So in junior high was when I really got into the horror movies that are classics, basically. And as I mentioned, my brother was a big part of that. So we weren't really watching the horror movies that were in theaters. We were watching everything that we could get on VHS and on DVD at the time. I remember, I don't know how he started, because he was scared of stuff too. Because I remember when he was real young, maybe kindergarten or like first grade, he went to a sleepover at someone's house and they watched the It movie with Tim Curry. So I remember he was like really scared of stuff for a while. During elementary school, I remember he had to like sleep in my bed with me for a while. Just like stuff like that. It was just like very bad. Like that's not a good movie to watch when you're a real little kid. So he was really scared of stuff too. But then in junior high, like I don't really know how he got interested in it. And I think if I was in junior high, he had to be in like 5th, 6th grade at this point. And he started getting interested in the Halloween films somehow. I really don't know how he discovered them. So he started getting the Halloween films like off of eBay and stuff. Like he'd have my mom buy them for him. And we started watching all these old horror movies, like the Halloween franchise, Nightmare on Elm Street, some of the Stephen King stuff like Salem's Lot, Carrie. We watched Friday the 13th stuff a little bit here and there. So we really got a good basis of a lot of these horror movies at a young age. And I don't know, I didn't really bring them up at school or anything because, I mean, no one was really watching these movies at the time. I mean, people, again, they were watching the new Saw movies and just whatever movies were coming out in the theater at the time, and no one really wanted to talk about Halloween and stuff like that when you're like 13, 14 years old. Everyone was looking at the new hot thing and not really looking at the films in the past. That's not the case nowadays. I mean, everyone sort of learned their lesson and they know what they're talking about now. But back then, it was kind of weird to like watch these movies. Just like right now, it's kind of weird when I tell people I like the Universal monster movies from like the 40s and stuff. It's kind of like weird, you know? But we started watching all those films. Halloween was something that me and my family really bonded over. I guess I shouldn't say family. My parents were never involved in this. But me and my brother and my sister, we really bonded over the Halloween franchise. We'd watch them all the time. Like every day we would just watch another one. My sister still watches them all the time. I don't really know if my brother watches them too much anymore. But I know me and my sister are still really into the Halloween franchise. I know my brother was for a while, and he actually saw the Halloween remake in theaters when he was in high school. I didn't end up seeing it in theaters because I was like, I don't know, I don't really know if I want to watch a remake of it or anything. But yeah, we watched all kinds of horror movies back then. We watched them all night long, and my sister tells this story the best because she had a separate bedroom for us. like, she had a separate bedroom from us. She was, like, down the hall, and, like, my mom would come in, and we always said we wanted the TV on so we could have, like, the light in the room. And she was like, okay, well, you can have the TV on, but you have on the Weather Channel, and the volume has to be down. So we would do that for, like, a half hour until, like, my mom stopped really paying attention to us and, like, thought we were asleep. And we would start watching the Halloween movies or something in the middle of the night. We'd watch Nick at Night, like Three's Company and The Cosby Show at the time. Not as controversial back then as it is now. But we would watch stuff like that. And my sister would always get so mad at us because I don't even think she had a TV in her room, and we would watch this kind of stuff. And she never told on us. So props to my sister for never telling on us at the time. Oh, another thing that I remember from my childhood that I was, like, really scared of was we had, like, these curtains in my house, in my bedroom, and our bedroom window was kind of, like, facing a street. So, like, whenever a car would, like, run down the street in the middle of the night, you'd see the lights come through the window, and it would make, like, a jack-o'-lantern face on the wall, basically, because the curtain had, like, two sides, and then there was a straight line from, like, where the windows separated, because, like, it was a push-up window. Ooh, excuse me, I burped. Excuse me, I burped. I'm sorry. I've gotten a comment in the past to not burp on the podcast, but you know what? I'm not going to find that and edit it out. So you know what? You're kind of stuck with the burp, so I'm sorry. So yeah, but basically it was a push-up window like you would see. So I'm explaining it, like, really well, but basically there'd be a jack-o'-lantern face on the wall, and when the car would move, the face would, like, go across the wall in my bedroom, and that was, like, really scary. I didn't really realize what it was until I, like, got a little bit older, but, like, when I was a real little kid, that was, like, really scary. I was just reminded of that. I don't know why, that just reminded me of that. But yeah, so, like, we would watch all kinds of stuff. Yeah, maybe someday I'll have my brother and my sister on a podcast, and we'll talk about some of the stuff we watched as a child, some of the films we made as a child, and yeah, it was just a really good time, like, in high school and stuff. Again, I was into these movies, like, on the side, but I had other high school stuff going on at the time, like I was in band and things of that nature. So horror wasn't a huge aspect of my life, but it was just always what we were watching when we came home for whatever reason. But it's not like now where horror is, like, all I talk about and stuff. Yeah, like, in high school, early college, I remember seeing, like, films like Paranormal Activity and Insidious. I thought those were really good. I really liked Paranormal Activity at the time because basically it was, like, a unique thing that I had never really seen at the time. I hadn't seen too many found footage films at that point. I hadn't seen Blair Witch Project, although I was aware of it. That came out when I was maybe in, like, second grade or something, and I remember a few kids talking that they had seen it in second grade, which is really crazy. But yeah, like, I remember, and Paranormal Activity was unique because you had to demand that your theater gets it. It wasn't a movie that was, like, wide release, so, like, the marketing was you had to, like, call your theater and, like, tell them you want to see Paranormal Activity so they'll eventually get it. And eventually our theater did get it. So we ended up going to see it, and I remember it was a very, very good time, very unique. And yeah, I saw, like, Insidious, movies like, I don't know, I think movies like The Unborn and The Uninvited, stuff like that came out around this time too, that they weren't very good. I think The Uninvited was good, actually. I'm gonna have to rewatch that one. But I learned recently, actually, that is a remake of a Japanese film, so I'm gonna have to watch the Japanese version as well. So yeah, I mean, horror's just always sort of been a part of my life. In college is where I really, really went full force with the horror thing, and a lot of that had to do with discovering Cinemassacre.com. Obviously, I did the top 10 Cinemassacre Monster Madness video, where I broke down every season of Cinemassacre Monster Madness, and fun fact, I did not realize that he was going to do a season this year, so obviously that season is not included in the video, because those videos actually dropped on the same exact day. Like, I posted the top 10 Cinemassacre Monster Madness seasons because I thought the series was over, and then later that day I see that they brought it back. So I guess it was just irony. I don't know. It was really crazy that happened at the same day. I'm happy Monster Madness is back, though. It's been a good time to watch the episodes that he's put out this year. But yeah, Cinemassacre was a big aspect of me getting back into horror films. As I talked about in that video, Camp Cult was the first year that it was going on where I watched it. And so I would watch Camp Cult, and then I would binge watch all the rest of the seasons of Monster Madness. And then in my spare time, I would be watching the films that he was talking about that I hadn't seen yet. I mean, I had seen Exorcist, I'd seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I'd seen all the big ones with my brother and my sister back in high school and stuff like that. But a lot of like the obscure ones I hadn't seen. Rick the Dick, Rick Two Good Pizer. I watched a lot of films with him around this time. We watched Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness. We watched Basket Case 1 and 2. We watched this really crappy movie called Zombie Doom, like this exploitation, like found footage movie that was like shot for the price of a used microwave, like $88 budget there. It was really, really bad and kind of disturbing, actually. But yeah, so I got into a lot of films, like hardcore then, and that's also when I was getting back into filmmaking as well. Again, largely part due to Cinemassacre. So if it wasn't for Cinemassacre's Monster Madness, I probably wouldn't be doing this podcast right now, having a YouTube channel, anything like that. So I really owe a lot to what Cinemassacre inspired in me. Yeah, so I really just got into horror films a lot during this time, and I started doing my own Monster Madness at this time. Not making videos, but it's where I would watch a horror movie every single day in October. And I did it by myself for the first year, and occasionally I'd have a friend watch with me here and there. But for the first year, it was like largely by myself, where I would watch a new horror movie every day. And then, like, the following 2 years, because I did this for my entire undergrad, basically, except for the first year, because the first year was when I first discovered what Monster Madness was. I would watch a new horror film every single day, and I actually have the lists somewhere on my Google Drive. I might actually have to find those lists here in a second, and sort of look at some of the films that I watched during these 3 years that I did it during my undergrad. I did it during grad school too, but those are easy to remember. I mean, I just did the Universal Monsters 1 year, and then the second year was just kind of like random stuff. But those first 3 years is like very good times that I remember, very fun times that I look back on with nostalgia. That first year when I was by myself, I would still watch a few films with Ricky here and there. I'd watch some with my roommate. We'd go to the theater, stuff like that. But it was mainly by myself in my dorm watching all these scary movies and stuff. But the second and third year that I did it was when I lived in essentially a frat house without the frat guys. It was just me and like 5 of my friends that lived in this house. At one point, there were like 7 or 8 of us that lived there because people just sort of like crashed there for months and months. But we would watch horror films every single day in October as well during this time. And we actually went a little too hardcore. Sometimes we watched 2 or 3 films a day. And luckily, I do have lists that we wrote down everything that we were going to watch. So I'm actually going to pull up those lists right now. So I'm going to take a little pause for the cause here to showcase the fine sponsor that makes this podcast free for you every week in October. So I'm going to find that list, and we're going to take a quick break.
Are you tired of plain old breakfast? Cereal's not sugary enough?
Are you tired of burnt pancakes and waffles? Then you need Slapjacks!
The slap against your face and cause a chemical reaction to heat up!
No cooking required, just slap and eat! Don't believe us? Here's a satisfied customer!
Slapjacks are the best breakfast food ever made. Slapjacks, slap those smiles back.
You heard it here, kids. Slapjack saves lives. Order at www.slapjacks.com.
You know, those slapjacks are pretty good. If you haven't tried them yet, I highly suggest that you give them a try. Anyway, we are back with the show. I have the lists here of the films that I watched during these Monster Madness seasons. It looks like I left out a couple as I look at this one actually ends off at 29. But basically, at the top of this, it was a Facebook post that I made where basically I was asking for recommendations and stuff. But I scrolled down here a little bit. As far as the films that I watched a couple good ones this year. I started off with Intruder. I watched White Zombie with Bela Lugosi, Maniac. Spooks Run Wild, which was also with Bela Lugosi. That one's a comedy. Basically, this year I was just kind of trying to watch a bunch of random stuff that I hadn't seen before, and stuff that was easily available. A lot of these movies were like public domain on YouTube or like stuff I could find for free online at various places, and a couple of them were ones that I had but hadn't watched yet. And as you'll see, one of them was in theaters, or maybe a couple of them were in theaters, and there's a big plane passing by right now. I don't know if you can hear the plane. Hopefully it doesn't crash into the House of Horror here. The House of Horror is a pretty big and obtrusive place on this relatively normal street, so I hope it doesn't crash into me. Okay, it looks like it's gone now. So yeah, I watched like American Werewolf in London, Waxwork, which is a really fun movie. I watched that one with Ricky. Blood Hook was another one I watched with Ricky. That one was an absolutely ridiculous movie. I watched the movie Black Sabbath, the anthology film, for the first time. That was a good one. I'm not going to go through every single one here, just sort of mention a couple that are worthy of mentioning. We did a Thing-a-thon this year because this was the year the remake of The Thing came out. The remake of The Thing, basically. So we watched the original Thing from 1951, the 1982 John Carpenter version, and then the 2011 remake, sequel, whatever you want to call it. Prequel, actually. It was a prequel to the John Carpenter one. So me and Ricky watched all three of those. I watched a movie called A Bucket of Blood from the 50s, and I remember posting about it on Facebook that I watched it, and Ricky said that he saw that movie before and it was terrible, but I actually thought it was kind of fun. I watched Peeping Tom, another film that I hadn't seen from back in the day. I watched The Mask of the Red Death from the 60s. I watched Basket Case 2 that year for the first time, apparently. Just all kinds of good stuff that I watched that year. So yeah, that was the first year that I did Monster Madness, largely by myself. Again, Ricky was with me a couple days. I'd have another friend, but for the most part, it was me laying in my bed with the computer pressed up against my face, because that's how my wife always yells at me the way I lay on my computer in bed. I'm like laying like almost completely flat, except for like my head is like perched up on two pillows, and my computer is like right at my throat, so like the screen is like as close to my face as possible. So this next year, this was in 2012, and apparently we stopped numbering them after 24. But I remember this year we had a lot of like double features and stuff. So we watched well more than 31. I think we maybe watched closer to 40 films this year, because on the weekends we didn't really have anything going on, so we'd watch like 2 or 3 films a day. But as far as the ones we wrote down, I watched films this year like Dead Alive, Abe Lincoln vs. Zombies, The Ring, Creepshow, Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. The Blair Witch Project, which was the first time I had watched The Blair Witch Project, was this time. And at the time, I was like really let down by it because, you know, I'd had it hyped up for like so many years, and I don't know what I was expecting. I mean, now I can appreciate it looking back at it, but at the time, I was like, I don't really see what the big deal is with this. We watched Blair Witch 2, The Book of Shadows, like immediately following it, so that must have been one of the days that was a double feature. Moby Dick 2010 was a film that we watched this year. Just a bunch of other random stuff. We watched Red Dragon and Manhunter. Oh, we watched all the Silence of the Lambs films that were out. Hannibal, Red Dragon, Manhunter, which was the original version of Red Dragon back in the day. We watched I Spit on Your Grave, Leprechaun in the Hood, Birdemic was the first year. I think that was the year Birdemic came out, maybe. We watched Birdemic, just like random stuff. Scream 2 we watched that year for some reason. And 2013 was like a year when we did like a billion movies, like every day was a double feature, basically. So I'm not gonna really go through every single one that we watched, because we'd be here way too long. But some of the highlights, I guess, we watched like The Lost Boys, Trick or Treat, Dead and Breakfast was a good one. That's like a musical horror comedy. That one was ridiculous. We watched the Amityville Horror remake and the original. Like that was a double feature one day to do that. Candyman, we watched Red State, The Omen, a couple Omen films actually. We did Hellraiser 1 and 2, Alien vs. Predator 1 and 2, Those were a double feature. We did a double feature of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We watched Leprechaun Back to the Hood because we watched Leprechaun in the Hood the first year. We watched a movie called The Gay Bread and Breakfast of Terror. I don't remember that one at all. We watched Hobo with a Shotgun. We watched all the Evil Dead films. We watched The Langoliers, apparently. I don't remember watching that. Sleepaway Camp, Ginger Snaps, Interview with the Vampire, Dusk Till Dawn, and I remember we started watching Monster Brawl, which they actually did on Cinemassacre's Monster Madness this year. They talked about Monster Brawl. I had seen it in the past because me, Jared, and Midnight Miles had watched it randomly one night. Because I remember we were over there trying to find something to do, and we were like scrolling through Netflix or whatever, and Monster Brawl was on there. Which, if you haven't heard of it, it's basically like a wrestling pay-per-view, but it's a horror movie. It's like just basically monsters fighting. And I remember Jared was like sitting there and he kind of like looked at me and Miles and he was like, well, if I'm not going to watch this with the two of you, I'm not going to watch it with anyone. So we watched the Monster Brawl. And I remember I thought it was pretty fun because, I mean, it was basically like a wrestling pay-per-view. With monsters. I mean, it was just really funny and ridiculous. And I remember I had put it on the schedule to watch in Monster Madness 2013 with my roommates. I must have saw it over the summer or something. It came out around that time, so I saw it like either that year or the previous year. And I thought, oh, my roommates are gonna love this because like we'd watched Evil Dead 2 and stuff like that, and like they kind of knew horror comedies and stuff, but we put on Monster Brawl and they couldn't do it. Like one by one they would dwindle off, like they'd leave the room or like go upstairs or like start doing other things. So eventually we just kind of shut it off after about like 20 minutes maybe, if that. Like they did not like Monster Brawl at all. So I guess I was in the minority. Like, have you ever been in that situation where like you want to watch a movie or something and like you put it on and everyone hates it? It's just like a super awkward feeling. Or like you're watching YouTube videos and like you put something on, it just kind of like kills the vibe. I don't know. It was definitely one of those moments, and I have no regrets. I mean, I haven't watched that movie again since then, but that movie is probably great. It's probably a lot of fun. But yeah, those were the years I did Monster Madness. Again, I did one of the Universal Monsters. I had like a DVD box set with all the major titles in the series, which if you guys have seen like my DVD collection video before, you've seen it in there. And then the other year, like the last year I did it by myself, again, and basically I just watched just random stuff here and there. I don't think I did a full 31 because at that time I was still working on finishing up on Lucky, I believe. So I didn't really have that much time to watch stuff. And I don't know. So that year, I don't know. I don't really remember too much from that year. A lot of it must have been in theaters as well. I think that was the year that like Tusk came out maybe. Some other stuff. So that was an interesting year. That was the last year I did Monster Madness, watching 31 movies. As I've gotten older, you kind of lose a lot of your free time, and it's hard to watch a movie every single day. And just like this month, it's been hard to make a video and have a video come up every single day. It's been quite the struggle. So I don't know if you like, people think that like YouTubers don't really work and like that's like the hardest. I don't know. That's a very cold take. That is very, I guess that's a hot take. I don't really know. Like what I'm trying to say is basically that like YouTubers work their ass off, and like I can only imagine people like, I don't know, like Shane Dawson and like Rhett and Link and stuff like that. Like some of like the huge like big YouTubers, like the amount of hours that they really have to pour into what they do. I mean, I guess like maybe with Rhett and Link not so much because they're not doing their own editing, I'd imagine. But like YouTubers that like where it's kind of like a one-man operation, I can see it being rather difficult. Like Cinemassacre is like a big example like that. I mean, now he has a team with him, but for a while he was like shooting the Angry Video Game Nerd episodes by himself and stuff. So like it's quite the challenge to do this whole YouTube thing. And even like my friends on YouTube, I mean, I know that like they put a lot of hours into what they do. No Star Reviews, if you're out there. He puts his body through some of the worst food you'll ever see in your life. His Dollar Tree taste tests and stuff. So that dude's a champion. Shout out to my boy Shad. So yeah, I mean, anyway, I just went off on a huge tangent. We're talking about horror films and my horror story. I guess the only thing left to really talk about is Hell at Heathridge. And Hell at Heathridge was a horror film that I worked on in college. It was my basically introduction to professional films. This was when I, again, had gotten into Cinemassacre. I'd gotten back into filmmaking. I decided that was what I wanted to do with my life for some reason. That's something I always knew I wanted to make films even when I was a little kid. I mean, obviously that's what I was doing, making videos. But I didn't really see it as a career back then. I mean, I still don't see it as a career now. But that's what I decided I wanted to do with my life. Changed my major. Luckily, my school had a film program. And what made me change my major the time that I did was that I heard about this film that they were making, and it was going to be a horror film. And I was like, I need to get on that. So I changed my major, do everything, because I was like a biology major at the time, surprisingly enough. Took a lot of chemistry courses, very high up stuff. So people think I'm like stupid, but I took very, very difficult science classes for a few years in college. I don't remember anything. But my brain has completely deteriorated since then, so I guess it doesn't really matter. But so they started advertising that they were going to be making this movie. And so I like tracked down the professors. I'm like calling them on the phone, emailing them like I need to get involved. Like what can I do? So like the next semester was when they were starting it. So thankfully I had a lot of time to like get into what I was trying to do and get into the classes that I needed. I had to like beg the teacher to let me into the pre-production class, Tracy Williams. I didn't know her at the time. I mean, obviously now we're very close. I haven't seen her in a few years, but she was a very, very positive mentor in my life. And I don't think I would be the person that I am today if it wasn't for her guidance. So I'm very, very thankful for her. But yeah, I didn't know her at the time. I'm like blindly calling her. I like got her number from like the school's website, like begging her to let me into this class. And she let me into the class. So I was obviously the new kid, and everyone there was like experienced with cameras, directing, stuff like that. I knew nothing. Like I just knew from what I knew when I was a kid, and that was shooting on VHS and stuff. So they brought me in. You had to like interview for a position on the film, on what you were going to do on the film. And I'm not going to go too in depth here. I would really love to have someone who worked on Heathridge come on the show at some point, and we'll just talk about our memories making that film. But basically I started as a casting assistant, and I was like so into it. Like I was obsessed with working on this movie, and I kind of like rose through the ranks basically because people saw what a hard worker I was. So eventually I got promoted to casting director. I took the casting director's spot. And then like through the course of the film, I did various other roles. Like the location manager dropped out, so I had to do that. I was the special effects supervisor, so I got to make all the different types of blood. Because you needed different kinds of blood for the different blood that was like in the scenes. Like I had blood light, which was like a very like thin blood. I had like a thicker one that was like super red. And I had to learn how to make all the blood. I didn't really know how to do it. Again, that was just another role I was thrown into. Like they didn't have a special effects guy assigned to the project. So basically they're like, oh, we probably need someone to do special effects. And they kind of just assigned me to do it as if I didn't have enough on my plate. But, you know, I'm a workaholic, so I just was like, yeah, I'll do the blood, whatever. And it was really fun. And that's also how I got really good friends with Keegan, because he was the visual effects supervisor. So I was special effects, he was visual effects. We started like working together on getting some of the shots that we needed for this movie and working together. So that's really how I became good friends with him. And we obviously directed Unlucky together and stuff. So, but Hell at Heathridge was a good time. Like I said, I did a lot of roles on that. I was an actor in it as well. I played a librarian in the film. Yeah, I mean, no one's really seen the film. I mean, the people that were at the premiere saw it, and it got a limited release at Family Video. So the very few people that like rented it saw it. The trailer for it's online. And there's a full documentary about the making of the film, which was on the second disc. It was like a 2-disc set. So the documentary's online. There's tons of behind the scenes videos online. That was one of the most fun summers of my entire life. I made a lot of good friends that summer. It was a really good time working on that film. It's one of those where a lot of people that worked on it did not like the final product, and I have not rewatched it in many, many years. Maybe that would be a good video to do. Just revisit Hell at Heathridge, maybe get a couple people who worked on it to sit down, maybe do like a commentary track on it. That'd be a fun thing to do. But yeah, Hell at Heathridge was a really, really good time. And then after that, worked on a few horror shorts here and there, through Kent State, stuff like that. Again, I don't really want to go too much in detail on a lot of these films, because we'll be here all day and we'll save that for a later date maybe. And then after that, I directed Unlucky. It's not a horror film, but it has like some horror influences, like with the cult members in it, if you've seen the trailer. Obviously inspired by Coven, or Coven as people insist, but Coven sounds like oven, man. It just doesn't work. But yeah, I mean, Unlucky was a good time. Again, it has like some horror elements in it. And after that, I worked on My Friend Dahmer, which is not a horror film in essence, but it's pretty horrific at some of the implications in it, and obviously horrific incidents that happened after that. So that was a horror film that I worked on. I was a small part of some other horror films that were shot. Like I was an extra in Them That Follow, the film that just came out recently, but they actually did not use me in any shots, but I got paid to be there for a couple days. And yeah, there are a couple others, nothing really worth mentioning here. Yeah, and then working on the House of Horror. Again, this was a very fun thing to do. I don't know if I'm going to be doing it next year. It was a ton of work. Maybe if I start working on it more in advance, or maybe instead of doing it just in October, I just have the House of Horror and it's all year round. And just do videos all year that are in the spooky genre. I'm not sure. I don't really know what the future holds for this or this show. Who knows? YouTube could completely shut down tomorrow from a hacker or something. Like, I never really know. I would like to work on another horror film. I have like a few ideas bouncing around in my head of some horror films. It's just finding the time and the budget to do it. It's very difficult, especially now that I'm married and have to work like a real job and stuff. Like, it gets like really hard to try to do your own personal projects. So I'm very thankful that I was able to do the House of Horror this year. 31 videos is just absolutely insane. I feel bad for my wife, who has essentially been a widow for the past month, because I've been locked in the House of Horror making all these ridiculous videos for the past month. I was working on them before that as well, but really this past month, that's all I've been doing is making these videos. And it's been a good time, but I'm very much looking forward to having a little bit of a break coming up. And tomorrow's Halloween, so I'm excited to sit outside and pass out candy and stuff. It'll be a fun time. And tonight, Midnight Miles and I are actually going to horror trivia. We went to horror trivia last week and kind of got our ass handed to us. We got in 4th place. Like, I went in super cocky. I was like, me and Miles on the same team, we're gonna fucking stomp everyone in this bitch. But we got in like 4th, and we missed maybe like 3 or 4 questions throughout the whole night. And 3 or 4 questions really takes you down, because I think the person that got in 1st got a perfect score, and I think the person that got in 2nd maybe missed 1. But yeah, we only missed a couple, but missing those couple really took us down. It took us down to 4th place, so hopefully tonight we can do a little bit better. Apparently this trivia is a lot harder than the trivia we did last week, because Miles went to it last year and he said it's really hard. He also said that like they have to do like, I don't want to say like dares, but yeah, like basically dares. Like basically you'll have to like fake your own death and stuff, and just like stupid things to like get points and stuff. So it's supposed to be very hard. So me and Miles are headed out to that tonight. We invited Dynamite Jared, but I think he just landed in Japan. Landed back from Japan. He is back in the States. He just landed back this morning, actually, so I don't think he's going to be coming. He's probably pretty jet lagged, and I think he told me he works tomorrow at like 6 a.m. So 6 a.m. on Halloween shift is not a fun shift. But yeah, so it's just gonna be me and Miles and maybe my wife or maybe a couple other friends or something. I don't really know. We're gonna see how it goes. So that's where I'm gonna be. I'm gonna be at I think it's called the B-side or something. I forget. Oh, the Side Quest. The Side Quest is the name of the bar that we're going to tonight. So if you're happening to be listening to this Actually, I don't even know if this will come out. We might have already done the trivia. This might be coming out after the trivia is actually over. So who knows? I'll let you guys know on Twitter how we did. So make sure you follow me on Twitter at Buddy Candela. Follow me on Instagram, all that good stuff. If you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Give this video a thumbs up. Let me know if you liked this episode. Let me know how I can improve my solo shows. Again, this was my first one ever, so let me know how I can do better next time. Probably take some notes. I should probably have something written down on what I want to say. Again, today I didn't write anything down at all, except for when I just looked at the lists of the horror films that I watched in a particular year. But yeah, so that's about it. That's all I really have to say about this. We have one House of Horror video left for tomorrow, which I have not started yet, so I need to go shoot that, edit that, and put it up by tomorrow on top of working and doing horror trivia tonight. So I've got quite a bit of work to do the next day and a half or so and still have time for trick-or-treating. But I really appreciate everyone for watching and listening and taking the time to check out my stuff over the past month. It really means a lot to me. Again, I don't really have too much to say. And so, yeah, I'm just going to wrap up this podcast and ride off into the sunset, as Steve Austin would say. So that's about it. I will see you back here tomorrow for another episode of the House of Horror. So take care and stay spooky.